The fire still crackled in the room, smoke spiraling toward the ceiling, and the smell of burning wood mixed with gasoline filled the air. I stood in the center, feeling every beat of my heart. Ethan watched silently, his face unmoving, as if he were part of this destructive symphony. "Alex," he finally spoke, eyes never leaving the flames. "Are you sure this is safe?" I smiled through the smoke and fire. "Safe? There's nothing safer. Think of this as purification, Ethan. Everything old has to burn so we can start anew." Outside, sirens were approaching, and I knew the firefighters would arrive in minutes, but there was no time for fear. We both knew the ritual would not wait. 25 years of waiting were over, and now there was no choice. Ethan slowly approached the metal table left from our previous preparations. He picked up one of the syringes, but I stopped him with a hand. "Not yet. Every step must be precise. We can't make a single mistake." Darkness filled the basement of the old church, and shadows moved along the walls, as if alive. Somewhere beyond the old doors, a faint hiss could be heard. The death demon was already near. My body tensed, but I felt no fear. I had grown used to this feeling during all these years of waiting. I stepped closer to Ethan and whispered, "Remember the number. 25. All of us who survived the first ritual must undergo it again. Otherwise—" Ethan nodded, knowing exactly what I meant. I glanced at the dark hatch in the ceiling. A soft tapping echoed, and I felt something watching us. Every sound in the basement seemed amplified. My heart raced, but my mind remained cold. "We need to prepare the place for the next stage," I said. "Are the organs ready?" Ethan replied quietly, "All set. As always." I walked over to the 3 large bags left from the previous ritual. Inside were carefully preserved organs, ready for transplantation. The smell was unpleasant, but it didn't provoke disgust. It reminded me that life and death always go hand in hand. "Good," I said. "Then let's begin. We must act fast, before the spirit of the last day of October disappears." I picked up the scalpel and examined the blades, their shine reflecting the lamp's flickering light. Ethan assisted me, handing the organs one by one onto the metal table. Every move had to be flawless, every action precise. While we worked, the basement became a silent witness to our preparation. No outside noises, just the crackle of burning wood and the light tap of our hearts. I remembered all the years we had waited for this moment, when Ethan and Chris were there planning our actions. Back then, it had seemed impossible, but now we were here, ready to undergo the ritual again, the one that grants immortality. The basement door creaked suddenly, and a cold draft swept through the room. Smoke from the fire mixed with the night chill, and something invisible seemed to freeze my movements. I knew the death demon was drawing near. "Alex, he's here," whispered Ethan, and I felt the tension spike. I turned slowly, ready to face what awaited us next. The shadows in the basement seemed to twist and dance on their own. I gripped the scalpel tighter, feeling the cold metal bite into my palm. Ethan's eyes met mine, full of a mixture of determination and fear, but we both knew there was no turning back. "Alex, are you sure we can control it this time?" Ethan whispered. I shook my head slowly. "Control? No. But timing. Timing is everything. One wrong second, and it's all over." Chris was still missing, but I had tracked him down days ago. He had been hiding, trying to forget what happened 25 years ago. But now, the ritual demanded his presence. There was no escaping it. I opened one of the organ bags carefully, each piece wrapped in a preserved solution. The pungent smell was overwhelming, but I focused. Every move had to mirror the original ritual, every incision precise. The rules were strict: deviate even slightly, and the death demon would take us all. Ethan handed me a small, ancient knife, its handle worn smooth from years of use. "Alex, this feels wrong," he murmured. "It's never felt right," I replied, my voice calm. "But it works. You know it works. Just follow my lead." The flames from the corner fire flickered across the walls, illuminating the old symbols I had painted with salt and ash. They formed the circle that would contain the ritual, the barrier between life and death. Outside, the sirens drew nearer, but in here, only we existed, trapped in this sacred, deadly moment. Suddenly, a faint scratching echoed from the far corner. The sound was subtle at first, barely perceptible, but it grew louder. Something was moving inside the shadows, watching us, waiting. My pulse quickened. "Alex, it's coming," Ethan hissed. I nodded. "Good. That means we're close. Everything is aligned." I placed the first organ onto the table, aligning it carefully with the marks I had drawn. Chris would arrive soon. The ritual would not proceed without him. My mind raced with memories of that first Halloween, the mistakes, the fear, the exhilaration of cheating death. This time, there could be no errors. Ethan helped me position the second organ. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. I could feel the presence of the death demon, its unseen claws brushing against the edges of my awareness. Every second that passed brought it closer. Then, a sudden noise from above made both of us freeze. The hatch in the ceiling rattled violently. My heart skipped a beat. Chris. He had arrived. I could hear his heavy footsteps as he descended into the basement, each step echoing like a drumbeat. He looked older, hardened by the years, but the recognition in his eyes was immediate. "Alex." "Ethan," Chris said, his voice trembling but resolute. I remember everything. I'm ready." "Good," I replied. "Place the organs in the circle. Follow my instructions exactly. There's no margin for error." The room seemed to tighten around us. The shadows thickened. The air grew heavy, and I felt the demon's breath on the back of my neck. The ritual was about to begin. We started. Every incision, every placement, every movement mirrored the instructions left by Aglaya, the old caretaker who had first guided us. She had warned us. Once the ritual starts, it cannot stop. Death or eternal life awaits. As we worked, the air became electric. A low hum filled the basement, as if the walls themselves were vibrating. Flames from the fire twisted unnaturally, casting grotesque shadows. I could sense the demon inching closer, probing the edges of our circle. Chris's hands trembled slightly, but he followed my instructions perfectly. Ethan and I coordinated silently, passing organs and tools with precision. The clock was ticking. Outside, the city slept unaware of the horrors happening beneath the old church. Only the three of us knew what this night meant: the continuation of a cycle, the renewal of a terrible immortality, the binding of our souls to a fate we could neither escape nor refuse. Finally, we reached the last step. The final organ was placed, the circle complete. I stepped back, breathing heavily, and whispered, "It's done. For now." But as soon as the words left my lips, the shadow stirred violently. The death demon had sensed the completion of the ritual. Its presence filled the room, a chilling darkness that pressed against our chests, making it hard to breathe. "Brace yourselves," I said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at my spine. "This is only the beginning." The room shook violently as the shadow swirled faster, almost alive. The death demon's presence pressed down on us like a physical weight. Ethan staggered, gripping the edge of the table, while Chris's face paled. I felt a cold sweat run down my back, but my hands remained steady. The ritual had been completed, but the real test had just begun. A low, guttural growl echoed from the darkness. The demon was testing us, probing the circle for weaknesses. I tightened my grip on the scalpel, knowing that any hesitation could be fatal. "Stay inside the circle," I ordered, my voice firm. "Do not step outside until I give the signal. It can't cross the boundaries we've drawn." Ethan nodded, his teeth clenched. Chris swallowed hard, fear flickering across his features, but he obeyed. Then the shadows began to twist and form shapes, figures of the dead, their faces grotesque, some familiar, some completely alien. The air filled with the smell of decay, of things long buried, things that should have stayed in their graves. "I can feel it. It's angry," Chris whispered. "Of course it's angry," I replied. "We've trapped it. But it will try to break free. Remember the rules. Stay calm. Do not let it touch you." The figures reached toward us, their fingers clawing at the edge of the circle. One of the apparitions, a twisted reflection of someone we had once known, let out a piercing scream. The sound rattled the walls and made my teeth ache. I gritted my teeth. "Focus! Channel your fear into control. This is why we did it exactly as Aglaya instructed." Ethan's hands shook, but he mirrored my movements, chanting the ancient words we had memorized. Chris joined in, and soon the three of us were in sync, a rhythm that bound the ritual together. The demon's attacks became sharper, more violent, but the circle held. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The flames of the fire warped and danced, casting chaotic light across the symbols on the floor. I could feel the demon testing me personally, its cold eyes on my back, its intangible claws grazing my spine. Suddenly, the figure of the old caretaker appeared, Aglaya. Her ghostly form radiated a pale light that cut through the darkness. "You must finish it," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "One mistake, and it will claim you all." I swallowed, nodding. "We're ready." The final incantation required a personal sacrifice, a token of life. I had prepared for this, a lock of my own hair, soaked in blood, infused with a portion of my own life energy. I placed it carefully in the center of the circle. Ethan and Chris followed suit, offering the same. The circle shimmered, reacting to our offerings. The death demon shrieked, a sound that felt like nails scraping metal against bone. The shadows writhed, wriggling and twisting as if in agony. And then, with a sudden rush, it was gone. The darkness retreated, the figures of the dead dissipating into mist. The air cleared, leaving only the lingering scent of smoke and iron. We collapsed to the floor, exhausted, hearts racing. The circle remained intact, the ritual complete. For now. Chris sat up first, wiping sweat and tears from his face. I can't believe we survived that." "We did," I said, still breathing heavily. "But remember, it's only temporary. The cycle will return. 25 years from now, we will face it again." Ethan shook his head, trembling. "I don't know if I can live that long, knowing what's waiting for us." "You don't have a choice," I replied, my voice cold but firm. "We're bound to it. Immortality has its price." Outside, the first light of dawn filtered through the broken windows of the old church basement. The city was waking, unaware of the horrors that had unfolded beneath its streets. I looked at Ethan and Chris. "We need to leave now. Clean up, burn the remains, make sure no one can trace this. Our lives depend on it." We moved methodically, disposing of the evidence, careful not to leave a trace. Every step was a reminder of what we had become, not just survivors, but prisoners of an ancient, malevolent cycle. Finally, as we stepped out into the cold morning air, I allowed myself a small sigh of relief. The ritual had succeeded. The demon was contained. For now. But deep inside, I knew the truth. The moment the 25 years were up, the nightmare would return, and none of us could hide from it. And somewhere, in the shadows just beyond sight, I felt it watching, waiting. The following days passed in a blur. Ethan and Chris barely spoke, each lost in their own thoughts, haunted by the memory of the demon's claws and the faces of the dead. I felt it too, an ever-present weight in my chest, a constant reminder that we had meddled with forces far beyond our understanding. I returned to my apartment, careful to lock every door and window. Yet sleep did not come easily. Shadows flickered across the walls, as if the room itself were alive, whispering the names of the dead and calling me back to the basement. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards made my heart leap. The next night, I found myself drawn back to the church. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was a sense of duty, or perhaps curiosity. The fire from the ritual had long since died, but the smell of smoke and iron lingered. The symbols on the floor, scorched into the stone, seemed to pulse faintly in the moonlight. Ethan arrived shortly after, carrying a bag filled with the remnants of the ritual, ashes, burned fabric, and a few personal tokens we had used as offerings. He looked exhausted, his eyes hollow. "Do you ever think about what happens if we fail next time?" he asked quietly. "I try not to," I replied. "But it's inevitable. One day, the cycle will catch up to us. We have 25 years, maybe less if we slip." Chris joined us, silently nodding. He had changed too, his once jovial demeanor replaced by a quiet vigilance. None of us spoke much, but our shared glance said everything. We decided to seal the basement as best we could. Heavy boards covered the entrance, and I etched protective symbols over the doorway, hoping they would delay whatever might try to escape. The city above remained blissfully unaware, and perhaps that was for the best. Still, the feeling of being watched did not fade. At night, when the wind howled through the empty streets, I could swear I saw shadows moving against the walls, eyes glinting in the dark. My dreams were plagued by visions of the demon and the twisted forms of the dead, always circling, always waiting. 1 week later, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single piece of parchment, yellowed with age, and written in a shaky, ancient script. It read, "The next cycle approaches. Prepare, or all you have gained will be for naught." I felt a chill run down my spine. The warning was clear. Despite our efforts, the ritual's consequences could not be avoided. The demon's patience was infinite. It would wait, watching, planning, and when the time came, it would return for us. I called Ethan and Chris immediately. "We have to start preparing," I said. "This isn't over. The first cycle was just a test. Next time, it will be far worse." Ethan's hands trembled as he held the phone. "How do we even prepare for something like that?" "We follow the instructions exactly," I said. "We gather what we need, perform the ritual, and stay vigilant. Every 25 years without fail." Chris was quiet, and I knew he was already thinking about the long road ahead. The reality was harsh. Immortality came with a price, and the debt we owed could not be postponed. That night, I stood alone outside the old church, looking up at the stars. The wind carried a faint whisper, and I felt a cold presence brush past me. Somewhere in the darkness, the demon waited, patient and eternal. And I realized the ultimate truth. Survival wasn't enough. To live, we would have to embrace the darkness within us, the part that had once committed unspeakable acts, and do so again, every cycle. I shivered, but I didn't turn away. Not yet. Not while I still had control over my fate. Because when the time came, we would rise again, and we would confront the demon on our terms. Until then, we waited, and the shadows watched. The legacy of the ritual was ours. The curse was ours. And for 25 years, we would live in silence, bound by blood, by secrets, and by the unyielding passage of time.